Good Saturday morning, everyone. Welcome into today's daily Bible reading for September the 23rd. Today, we are reading together in 2 Kings chapter 8. 2 Kings chapter 8 is going to have a return appearance from the Shunammite woman that Elisha previously raised her son from the dead. She's going to show up here in this text. Also, we're going to see something that has not been super common within the story of the kings. We're going to see the succession of kingship in one of the pagan nations, and then we're going to see the same thing for a couple of the next kings in Judah. So the Shunammite woman, the succession of kingship in Aram specifically, and then two new kings show up on the scene in Judah. Let me get the text up on the screen for us of 2 Kings chapter 8. We'll read along together here. 2 Kings chapter 8 in verse number 1. Second Kings chapter 8, verse number 1. Elisha said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Get ready, you and your household, and go live as a resident alien wherever you can, for Yahweh has announced a 7-year famine, and it has already come to the land." So the woman got ready and did what the man of God said. She and her household lived as resident aliens in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. When the woman returned from the land of the Philistines at the end of the 7 years, she went to appeal to the king for her house and field. The king had been speaking to Gehazi, the attendant of the man of God, saying, "Tell me all the things Elisha has done." While he was telling the king how Elisha restored the dead son to life, the woman whose son he had restored to life came to appeal to the king for her house and field. So Gehazi said, "My lord the king, this is the woman, and this is the son Elisha restored to life." When the king said to the woman, or when the king asked the woman, she told him the story. So the king appointed a court official for her, saying, "Restore all that was hers, along with all the income from the field, and from the day she left the country until now." Elisha came to Damascus while King Ben-Hadad of Aram was sick. The king was told, "The man of God has come here." So the king said to Hazael, "Take a gift with you and go meet the man of God. Inquire of Yahweh through him, will I recover from this sickness?" Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking with him a gift, 40 camel loads of all the finest products of Damascus. When he came and stood before him, he said, "Your son, King Ben-Hadad of Aram, has sent me to ask you, will I recover from the sickness?" Elisha told him, "Go say to him, you are sure to recover, but Yahweh has shown me that he is sure to die." Then he stared steadily at him until he was ashamed. The man of God wept, and Hazael asked him, "Why is my Lord weeping?" He replied, "Because I know the evil you will do to the people of Israel. You will set their fortresses on fire. You will kill their young men with a sword. You will dash their children to pieces. You will rip open their pregnant women." Hazael said, "How could your servant, a mere dog, do such a mighty deed?" Elisha answered, "Yahweh has shown me that you will be king over Aram." Hazael left Elisha and went to his master, who asked him, "What did Elisha say to you?" He responded, "He told me you are sure to recover." The next day, Hazael took a heavy cloth, dipped it in water, and spread it over the king's face. Ben-Hadad died, and Hazael reigned in his place. In the 5th year of Israel's king Joram, son of Ahab, Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, became king of Judah, replacing his father. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. He walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done, for Ahab's daughter was his wife. He did what was evil in Yahweh's sight. But for the sake of his servant David, Yahweh was unwilling to destroy Judah, since he had promised to give a lamp to David and his sons forever. During Jehoram's reign, Edom rebelled against Judah's control and appointed their own king. So Jehoram crossed over to Zair with all his chariots. Then at night he set out to attack the Edomites who had surrounded him and the chariot commanders, but his troops fled to their tents. So Edom is still in rebellion against Judah's control today, and Libnah also rebelled at that time. The rest of the events of Jehoram's reign, along with all his accomplishments, are written in the historical record of Judah's kings. Jehoram rested with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Ahaziah became king in his place. In the 12th year of Israel's king Joram, son of Ahab, Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, became king of Judah. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, granddaughter of Israel's king Omri. He walked in the ways of the house of Ahab and did what was evil in Yahweh's sight, like the house of Ahab, for his father had married into the house of Ahab. Ahaziah went with Joram, king of Ahab, to fight against King Hazael of Aram in Ramoth Gilead, and the Arameans wounded Joram. So King Joram returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds of the Arameans, or that the Arameans had inflicted on him at Ramoth Gilead when he fought against Aram's king Hazael. Then Judah's king Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, went down to Jezreel to visit Joram, son of Ahab, since Joram was ill. And that is the text of 2 Kings chapter 8. Again, some seemingly random stories here within the text, but they do help to progress the timeline along quite nicely. One of those things, though, that just seems to be kind of a side story is this, what is said about this Shunammite woman. And what we continue to see, though, I think from her mentioning here within the text is that because of her faithfulness to God, God continued to take care of her. He continued to care for this woman, and he did so originally by the fact that he warned her that a 7-year famine was coming. And because of that, he told her through Elisha that she needed to go away. And so she ends up going to be resident aliens in the land of the Philistines for the 7 years. But at the end of those 7 years, she came back and she appealed to the king to say, hey, can I have my land back? She had abandoned her land, obviously, because there was no reason to stay there. There was going to be this famine. She went off to a foreign land, but now she's back and she needs her land back. And remember, it was very important to the people of Israel that the land given to them originally, that it remained in their family. They saw that as a direct inheritance from Yahweh. It was very special to them. So she had a desire to receive her land back. Now, it is interesting, the text tells us that the king was actually speaking with Gehazi at this time. So we have a couple of questions that need to be asked here. Number one, when is this taking place? This is taking place prior to the Naaman story, where Gehazi ends up being turned into a leper. If this is prior to that, then we might ask the question, well, why? Why is Gehazi speaking with Elisha's enemy? He was not exactly on great terms with the kings. But could it also be that this was taking place in chronological order, according to the way the text is written, and that this is taking place after Naaman was healed and Gehazi was made a leper? If that is the case, then what we have here is something very interesting, that the king seemed to be okay to be in the presence of a leper. To me, that's not very surprising. Why? Well, it's not very surprising because it isn't as if the king and the people of Israel, the northern tribes at that time, were exactly concerned with many aspects of the law, if any at all. They probably don't seem to be very concerned with cleanliness laws that were stipulated within what Moses gave to the people, what God gave to the people through Moses. So it's just a very interesting thing that we see this man, that we see presumably King Joram here interacting with Gehazi and possibly doing it while Gehazi is now a leper. But the text does tell us why he does this, again, because he wants to hear about everything that Elisha has been doing. It just so happens that Gehazi is telling the king about this particular story where Elisha has raised this son to this particular woman. Whenever this woman shows up and she presents to the king the issue about, she's gone away, now she needs the place back. And you know what? The king gives it to her. The king restores all that was hers, along with all the income that the field had garnered from the day she left until she came back. So God not only warns her about this famine, but then once she comes back, he blesses her through the king to receive the land back and to receive the benefit of the produce of this field and what it had sold for and the income that had been gained from it. Again, what's the difference here as opposed to what we're going to see with let's say Judah here in a little while once they're going up into battle and being defeated? Well, the difference is faithfulness. This woman was faithful to God. She was someone who showed extreme kindness to one of his prophets. And for that, he continued to bless her in a very real and a very substantial way. The text moves on to shift focus now to Damascus, where the king Ben-Hadad is sick. And he seems to have a great respect for Elisha, the man of God. And it might be, let me double check this real fast. Let's see here. Yeah, it very well might be that this is the same Ben-Hadad that knew of Elisha bringing healing to Naaman. So because of that, he seems to have some confidence in Elisha, and he's feel confident enough to ask Elisha whether or not the sickness that he is currently experiencing will be his end or if he will recover. So Ben-Hadad sends Hazael, one of his chief commanders, to Elisha to ask him this particular question. So he asked, he's speaking in the voice of Ben-Hadad, will I recover from the sickness? And Elisha tells him, you are sure to recover, but Yahweh has shown me that he is sure to die. Very interesting. How can this be? We'll address this more in a second. But notice in verse number 11 that I think that's how the pronouns go. I think that Hazael stared steadily at Elisha until Hazael was ashamed. I think that's the way the pronouns go. I could be wrong there, but that seems to work out best to understand this. And he stared at him, and while he is staring at him, Elisha begins weeping. And Hazael asks, why are you crying? Why are you weeping? And it seems that that Yahweh has given Elisha some insight into the future. It's not a very good future, unfortunately, for Israel. The fact that he sees the evil that Hazael would bring against the people of God, that he would set their fortresses on fire. He would kill their young with the sword. He would dash their children to pieces. He would even rip open pregnant women. And Hazael's thinking, how could your servant, a mere dog, do such a mighty deed? How can I do that? I'm not the king. I'm just, I'm just a guy within the kingdom. Yeah, Hazael had a high position. He's like thinking, there's no way I could pull this off. I think that Hazael is probably sincere in asking this. How could this happen? But he says, Elisha does, he answers and says, well, Yahweh has shown me that you're going to be king over Aram. Interesting. I wonder if this was something that Hazael had already been thinking about with the opportunity for Ben-Hadad being sick, or maybe this was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy that this planted the idea in Hazael's mind to the extent that he's willing to carry it out. Now go back again. He said, you'll recover from the sickness, but you're also going to die. Let's read it specifically here. Go say to him, you are sure to recover, but Yahweh has shown me that he is sure to die. That doesn't mean that he's going to, this does not mean that he is lying about or he's mistaken about recovering from the sickness. It very well could be the fact that Ben-Hadad would recover from the sickness. Notice, he doesn't die from the sickness. He dies from an assassination. What does Hazael do? The king is obviously probably in a very weakened state, so he takes a very heavy cloth. He dips it in water. He soaks the cloth, and he puts the cloth over the king's face so that he drowns. He basically drowns the man, smothers him to death. So he very well probably could have, if I take Elisha's word for it, and I do take Elisha's word for it, he would have recovered from the sickness. But he did die, and he died at the hands of Hazael, and he ends up becoming king of Aram. And we're going to see this later on in chapter 12, verses 17 and 18, the acts of war that he carries out against Israel. So we'll see that in a few days. Now the focus shifts from, it goes from first Israel, and then the scene shifts to Aram, and now the scene shifts again to Judah, and we're seeing the crown being passed down in Judah from Jehoshaphat to Jehoram. And the text tells us, unfortunately, that Jehoram walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. Remember, this is a different Jehoram. Remember, there's Joram and Jehoram, and same kind of, again, very confusing here, but we'll do our best to keep ourselves straight. How about that? So Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, he passes the crown to his son Jehoram. Okay. Problem with Jehoram is that he lived like and ruled like the kings of Israel. Remember, there was a number of kings in Judah who did well in ruling. They ruled according to the ways of Yahweh. They were pleasing in Yahweh's sight because they were faithful to the covenant. Not so with Jehoram. Instead, the text says that he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, not in the kings of Judah, but he walked like Jeroboam and his successors. He walked like they walked. He did as the house of Ahab had done, which seems to indicate to me that there was paganism, that there was Baal worship taking place. And it gives us reason why this was the case. Was the case because he had married a daughter of Ahab. So his in-laws, his mother and father-in-law, were Ahab and Jezebel. No wonder the text tells us he did what was evil in Yahweh's sight. Yet Yahweh did not destroy Judah because of his covenant with David. Because of his faithfulness to David, he did not destroy Judah. Also during Jehoram's reign, again, go back to the Shunammite woman. She was faithful to God. God blessed her. Here we have a king in Jehoram that was not faithful to God, and God does not bless him with strong military success. In fact, Edom and Libnah both rebel against Judah and end up taking away their freedom back, take their freedom back from Judah, and they begin to rule themselves. Not surprising that there are failures when you're not faithful to God. From there, we see that Jehoram, he passes on and gives the crown to his son, Ahaziah. Remember, there was an Ahaziah in Israel as well, I believe. So we'll do our best to keep this straight. Ahaziah did not have a very long run. He was only king for 1 year. And we're told about his mother being Athaliah. And then she was the granddaughter of Israel's king Omri. And again, for this Ahaziah, he walked in the ways of the house of Ahab. Again, not just paganistic worship of Yahweh, but probably straight up paganistic worship of the Baals and Ashtoreths. And again, he did this like the house of Ahab, for his father had married into the house of Ahab, and that influence of Ahab most certainly was found within Judah now. So the wickedness that had been in Israel has now perpetrated the kingdom of Judah, and that influence has corrupted Judah in a very real way concerning these particular kings, Jehoram and Ahaziah. The text tells us, and it really begins the next story in chapter 9, where Ahaziah went with Joram, the son of Ahab, against King Hazael of Aram and Ramoth Gilead. And the text tells us that the Arameans actually wounded Joram. So Joram went back to Jezreel to recover from his wounds. And it tells us that Ahaziah goes to Joram, in order to visit him and check to see basically his status. That's where we'll pick up tomorrow in chapter number 9, I believe. So we'll be reading that then. If you have any questions or comments about this text, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below as I think about just a takeaway, couple takeaway thoughts from today. For this chapter, we see something very simple, that whenever you're faithful to God, he's faithful to us, and we will definitely experience his blessings. Does not mean, though, that just because things are good, that we are in step with God. It does not mean just because things might be rough, that we might be struggling in some way, that we are not in step with God. Health and wealth gospel, it's heresy of the highest degree, but we can gain things that are intangible: peace, joy. Those things are abundance when we are walking faithfully before God. And we can certainly enjoy those things. And also, again, just think about the idea of influence. Who do we surround ourselves with? The problem with Jehoram and Ahaziah is that they were influenced by this family. So, that just gets to the very real thing. And we need to be very careful about who we marry. We need to encourage those who are of marrying age and considering marriage to marry people who are going to be good influences. It's not just the spouse, either his self or herself, but also the family. Got to think about the influence that you're going to be surrounding yourself with in marriage, but also just for us in general. Whoever we surround ourselves with is probably going to have a great influence upon us. If we don't surround ourselves with the best people, don't be surprised whenever we find ourselves not very off in a good way, but because of their particular influence. So think about those things today. Think about pursuing God faithfully and being able to benefit from that. So think about the influence of those who are around us and the type of people they might shape us into by their influence. Thanks so much for tuning in today for this reading. Hope you have a great rest of your Saturday. May God bless you in all that you do, and hope you'll tune in again tomorrow as we read together from 2 Kings chapter 9. Take care and God bless.